Welcome to the premiere edition of Pandemopoly, the game the globalists play. So as you can see here, we have a board. It's a board game of sorts called Pandemopoly. And unlike the board games where you go around in Monopoly, you play with a little real estate game, etc., this one is the game for the world. It's the game for the big marble. It's the game for the blue globe. It's the game for Mother Earth, for Gaia. And it's been going on for hundreds, if not thousands of years. There are a few people on this planet that would like to have it all. And they'd like to have the rest of us have nothing. If you haven't looked, take a look at the Georgia Guidestones. Take a look at some of the comments by Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski. Take a look at the comments by David Rockefeller, by George H.W. Bush. Take a look at the principles and underlying ideas of the United Nations. And then start to back up through our history, and you will see that the history that you have been taught is not true. Yes, things happened on certain days. Certain people became president and vice president. The cabinets were filled with certain individuals. But guess what? It didn't matter. The big picture is always ignored. And because public schools were designed, take a look at some of the comments and quotes about the public school system as it was set up over 100 years ago, to make us stupid, to make us average, to make us memorize, to make us good workers, not to make us creative, not to make us adventuresome, not to make us question. And take a look at what has been done with our mainstream media, which many of us now come to call the fake news. They'd like to project that what you and I are doing is fake news, but the truth of the matter is the fake news is by the globalist, corporate, manipulative market. And they're going to tell us what they want us to know, and that's true in the textbooks, that's true in everything else. So, 300 years ago approximately, Benjamin Franklin was an internist, was indentured to his older brother to become a printer. And at the time, the press, as it formulated Benjamin Franklin, became wealthy, franchising his version of print after he had studied in England, gotten his first printing presses, became entrepreneurial, became the printer for the Postmaster General and the printer for printing money for some of the states and for the early colonies. And eventually he franchised it out and set up small independent presses all over the colonies, all over the early United States, and finally retired in his wealth, one of our founders. And so when our Constitution speaks of freedom of the press, it isn't talking about 5 mega corporations that happen to tell us exactly what they want us to know. The freedom of the press, as it was originally contemplated in the Federalist and elsewhere, exactly responded to our founders, and particularly our founder Benjamin Franklin, who said, look, we need to protect all of these little folks that have things to say. So journalism has taken on a new place. YouTube is one of the locations where journalism is going on, and we are each, I'm not a journalist as such, but we are each of us who announce and describe and engage and report are journalists. And we are as entitled to present our views and our position and our news as are the 5 big corporations that have taken over all the rest of the media. So that's the start of it. But that's just the mainstream media. That's one little piece of it. And the mainstream media is owned by the same people that own all the rest of this stuff. So let's take a look at some of the pieces. I'm going to rather randomly address this today. And I may do a more in-depth review of various pieces of it, both diagrammatically, both as it relates to industries and also as it relates to ongoing historical facts. I mean, there's some obvious things that most of us, what should I call us, entrepreneurial journalists independent journalists. Let's get out of the fake news kind of thing. People who present our opinions are journalists. People who present our view of things are constitutionally protected by the Bill of Rights. And let's see that that happens. And that we are not censored or prescribed in any way. So let's take a look. Some of the things that I think are really critical to it, obviously, is one of them in the pandemopoly, in the pandemonium of Pandemopoly is war. And most of us were raised with the idea that war was just something that happened, that some archduke was killed, or some idiot like Hitler was provocative or picked on it. But the truth of the matter is that many of these wars, if not all of them, have been financed by the globalists, have been carried on behalf of the globalists. Let me give you an obvious example. The War of 1812, the Brits tried to take back the colonies. And the Brits tried to take back the colonies not because that's what they wanted to do or what George wanted, George III, the King of England, wanted to do, but because the globalists wanted to bring the United States to its knees, because the United States had refused to renew the banking charter of 20 years that had been promoted by and incorporated at the request of Alexander Hamilton, the great hero of Broadway, who is not a hero at all. He's a globalist who was bought out by the globalists to undermine our independence, as I see it. So there was a 20-year charter. The 20-year charter ended, I think, in 1809 or 1810. And in 1812, since we had not properly responded, there was the attack on Washington, D.C. and the burning of our Capitol. Subsequent to that, while we defeated the Brits, we also succumbed to another 20-year charter, which went to, I believe, 1836. But in 1827, we had Andrew Jackson, who knew what was going on, who knew that the globalists were attempting to take over, who knew that they were manipulating our political scene, our government scene, overseeing our rights, and were using fiat currency, that is, currency that we authorized with no benefit to us, but we authorized them to issue, for them to charge interest on, and for them to expand or subtract from our money supply at their whim, and to play with the monetary system and gain the advantage of making all the money that the increase in monetary funds throughout the United States in its early time were given. So Andrew paralleled and independently formed or used our banking system as constitutionally mandated, and they attempted to kill him. He was shot at twice. The guns malfunctioned both times. The next one was during the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln printed greenbacks, and guess what? He was assassinated. It was just a lone gunman, right? It was the Lee Harvey Oswald of the time, but it wasn't. And there is evidence that the conspiracy included the globalists attempting to take Lincoln down because he was going to destroy the banking monopoly. You think that maybe this has gone away, right? Well, no, it hasn't. Currently, there are 164 nations that have private banks operated as the central bank of the country, including the United States, including the Bank of England, including France, and almost all of the rest of the world, except for 3 countries, I believe, Iran, North Korea, and somebody else. And part of the reason that we're after North Korea and Iran is, guess what? They're not part of the globalist process. Libya did not want to be part of the globalist process, so what did we do? We took him out. Take a look at some of these other things. Obviously, many of you know about false flags and know that the false flags are here, that they're happening on an ongoing basis. We don't always know why they're happening, but it fits into the problem, reaction, solution situation. And one of the big problems that they're having right now with global takeover is that us poor little Americans still have the right to bear arms. So all of these terrorist attacks, in my opinion, or many of the terrorist attacks, are fundamentally underpinned either with fake incidents or with incidents that are perpetuated by or created by the MK Ultra form of interaction, which is somebody being manipulated to engage in terrorist activity to the benefit of those who want to shut down guns. Voter fraud, the Democrats right now, and this is not a Democrat or Republican problem, in the global perspective it's everybody's problem, but in the most recent election it is obvious not just that the Democratic National Committee manipulated to benefit Hillary over Bernie, but there is good statistical evidence and probability that in something like 16 or 17 of the states where, guess what, George Soros has Diebold and they can digitally manipulate the outcomes, that at least in those 16 states the exit polling was so statistically different from the apparent vote that it is obvious. There's less than one chance in millions that the election actually was accurately reflects the people who voted, the number of people who voted for each of the parties, and that was in the primary. Those kinds of statistical anomalies, it sounds like a little thing, right? Are apparent in 2000, 2004, and on in each of the elections, including both Bush and perhaps Obama, certainly Clinton, and perhaps before then. So it isn't just dead people that vote, it isn't just illegals that vote, it is the digital manipulation of millions of votes to change the outcome with the thumb on the scales, the thumb on the digital scales. You've got taxes and fees. This is something that has been going on in our country on the income tax basis since the early 1900s, and was accelerated when we passed in December of 1913 the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, by the way, folks, and most of you know this, is not federal, and there is no reserve. And the money that is being created by the Federal Reserve, if you take a look at your paper bills, it says on it, Federal Reserve note. It's not United States dollar, it's not a greenback, it's a Federal Reserve note. In other words, a private banking organization which is not audited by us, not reviewed by us, the actual ownership is not known to us in any detail, and is not controlled by us, and for which we pay interest, is the one that prints our currency for us. Isn't that a good idea? It's a great idea, right? And then you go to the Bank of England, and then you go to the Euro banks, the central Euro banks, the Bank of Germany, the Bank of Japan, and you go to the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, which manipulate all of the little countries and leverage them. So when you had the failure of finances in Greece, what was it, the chicken or the egg? Was it the globalists who created the problem? Was it the globalists who allowed Greece to create the problem? But in any case, it doesn't matter. What the globalists did was take down Greece and much of Greece's value in the process. I would say to you that the debacle of 2008, the recession of 2008, is a false flag. It is a fake event. We like to think that the banks fell because there was hyper lending on the mortgage funds, and that the bundling of mortgages caused everybody to go down. But a lot of that was planned. It was systematically planned. The derivatives, the cross obligation of derivatives now is set up to take down all the world banks whenever the bankers want to. There's a red switch that they can use to shut the whole thing down and fake it. And what I would say as a positive response to the process is, if and when that happens, because everybody says, you know, we're going to have a digital reset, we're going to have a money reset. Well, it's not our idea. It's the idea of the bankers. And when that happens, instead of problem, reaction, solution, we need to be prepared for problem, no, we'll fix it, and you won't. So let's take a look at some of the other things. Plague and disease. Interesting that we've had some global events, and some of them are beginning to point toward the possibility that some of the plagues and viruses are not necessarily random events. They didn't come from a monkey or from a chicken or from something else, but they were perhaps manufactured by people that wanted to create problems. So in North Africa we have Ebola, right? We have the Zika virus in Brazil. We had a recent outbreak of hemorrhaging eyeballs from another virus. It happens all over the world. We can take a look at these and say these are horrible events, and they truly are. They're plague-like events that could take down millions and millions of people. And these little outbreaks, such as they are, can be seen as test cases. As we're stretching our wings, we're trying to see what would happen if we just turned this loose on everybody. I hate to put it that way, but that's in fact what may be part of the process. So we have bank resets like India, for instance, last year, where they removed the major bills, the big bills, from the rupee. I think is that correct? Anyway, the Indian currency, and made all the people that were working on a cash basis, a billion people or more working on a cash basis, turn their money in, and people had fortunes under their mattresses and elsewhere that they were required to turn in. It could happen here, folks. The 100 could get pulled here. The 50 could get pulled here. And for people who had $10,000 or $100,000 worth of Indian currency, many of them were asked to show how they had earned it, and if they couldn't demonstrate how they'd earned it or that they'd paid tax on it, they were taxed then to the tune of 30 or 40 or 50%. And then they were only allowed to take a few dollars at a time or a few Indian currency at a time out of the bank after they were required to put it in. So it was a total shakedown of the monetary system in India. And again, it's just a test case. It is a way of playing with how would this work if we did a big deal. The Hawaiian case recently of the alleged missile crisis and notification. Is that a real event? Is it a false flag? Or is it a test case to see how people will react? There are many, many of these events throughout the world that I know most of you are paying attention to, and is stuff that we're seeing coming through QAnon. But the global perspective of this is that it goes back to the 1770s in our country, and before then elsewhere. So those who do not know history are condemned to repeat it. Those who do not remember history are condemned to repeat it. The problem is, with many of us, that the history that we were taught is not the history that will help us know what is going on now. And what we need to do, as I see it, is to advise ourselves as to what really has been happening for hundreds of years is happening now, and why it has become perilously close to closing in on the game of Pandemopoly. There is the possibility that millions or billions will be taken into slavery or taken down or starved. You know, we did the fun little thing during the Clinton administration, and it was not fun, and it was not playful. They sanctioned Iraq, right? And Madeleine Albright was asked, how is it that you can justify 500,000 children dying? The truth of the matter is that they quit counting. The United Nations quit counting at 500,000. It was more than that. And the United Nations only counted 5 and under. So there were many more than 500,000. And they quit counting in 1996. So there were many more people than that died because we sanctioned and boycotted Iraq. And her answer was, you know, some of these things are just worth doing. Not to quote her exactly, but to paraphrase it, that, you know, there are tough decisions that have to be made. Well, no, there are not tough decisions that have to be made that kill 500,000 people. So since then, since 2001, since George Bush's false flag of 9/11, millions of people have been killed throughout the Middle East. Millions more, hundreds of thousands, excuse me, have been killed in the Middle East, perhaps 400,000 or 500,000 in Iraq, and hundreds of thousands elsewhere. Millions have been displaced, and obviously the outpouring of people from the Middle East and from Northern Africa into Europe is another example of that. But it plays into the globalist hands for Pandemopoly, both because war makes huge money, war gets access to oil and the other assets of the area, war takes down those who want to be independent of the banking system, war displaces people and kills off millions, war causes chaos in other countries where these people go, war costs billions and trillions of dollars, and the tight mega corporations are the ones who benefit from it. So us little people go to war, us little people are uniformed and trudge off, and the billionaires and trillionaires reap the benefit. And it is inexcusable, it is unconscionable, it is a process which is going to cause us great hardship. And as has been pointed out, Dustin Nemos pointed out the other night, and it is absolutely true, if we don't face it now, the convergence of pandemopoly, of the closing in, of the global global manipulation of everything that we have, combined with artificial intelligence and digital monitoring of us, if those two close in to gain the stronghold that will take us into slavery, as he pointed out, and as is certainly the case, we will never get out. Your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren will be a part of the AI process if there are any. And any of us they don't want to be here won't be here. So I have looked over the last few months and year. I have researched hundreds of books. This is the Venona Secrets, showing what was done before and during World War II by communists that were manipulating the game and played to get us into World War II. The Creature from Jekyll Island is a book that I read recently about the games that were played to get us, the Federal Reserve. This is the Fruits of Graft. As you can see, it's something that I have reviewed about the Great Depression then and now and how that impacted. There are many, many more books that will clandestinely almost fill in the blanks for the false history we've been given. But we need to be aware that the real history is what we need to watch, because the real history is going on right now, and it is a perfect replica of the dysfunctionality that we have been suffering for hundreds of years. So stay tuned. You're welcome to give any input that you may have. If you think I'm being totally goofy, you're welcome to that as well. It is a way of putting humor and playfulness into this very serious situation. I can be playful about it, and I will be playful about it here in some other ways. I will step into the place of your banker. This is more of an introduction than anything else, and to give a little nibble of the various pieces that have been presented over the last few years to show us what's really going on. They are hints, and once we start to pay attention to those hints, we can become much more aware of what's really happening. And most of you do, as do I. Let's stay at it. So feel free to give me any input or response you have. If you have things that you care for me to address or prioritize as respect to any or many of these, I mean, obviously they're all in play. Feel free to do so. If you have suggestions about things I might look at, feel free to do that. Please give a thumbs up to this little presentation. Subscribe if you will. I would be delighted to have you be part of the process. And hit the little bell that will let you know that I'm going to be doing this, because as we progress and as the news progresses, as these future false flag events and other playful craziness come about and the mainstream media makes no mention of it, I will, as will many on YouTube. And as I have said in others, it is Unite the 10 Million. It is the 3%, as was the case in our Continental Congress and the colonial times when we declared independence. 3% of the people at any given time change the outcome of who we are, change the outcome for all of us. And those of us who step forward and don't simply talk or sit or watch or complain, that begin to take action, that begin to require people to pay attention, to answer to us, to respond to the false flags, to tell us what the real history is. Those are the people that are going to make a change in this world as I see it. And I encourage and implore and request that you join us, that you join us in any way you see fit. You call us whatever you want to call us, I don't care. And you step forward to lead us into this next phase, because we need to lead out of this and into freedom, or we are going to be facing with a more and more difficult situation. Thank you for watching.